What I am most excited about, and everyone listening knows, and dude, gut check me here. The last question we ask is always, what's the one thing founders need to hear now, or
Yeah.
CEOs or revenue leaders need to hear now
Yeah.
to bridge the gap that they're drowning in? And I'll say it now, and you got to listen to the end to hear it. It is the single best piece of advice that has ever been shared in 80 something episodes of this show.
100%. I totally agree.
Welcome back to another episode of the Bridge the Gap podcast powered by Revenue Reimagined. Today's guest is Doug Camplejohn, the founder and CEO of coffee.ai, which is an AI-first CRM. Doug has a proven track record in building and scaling successful companies with startups that include MyPlay, MI5 Networks, and FlipTop, all of which achieved successful exits. With leadership experience at LinkedIn as the VP of Sales Solutions, Salesforce as the GM of Sales Cloud, and Apple as a QuickTime product manager, Doug combines deep technical experience with strategic vision. He's passionate about creating transformative products and building great teams. This is an episode you don't want to miss.
Awesome. Doug, so one of the first questions I have for you is working at all these huge companies, like what was the motivation, not necessarily for just coffee, but to be like, I'm going to go do a startup. I saw you went from LinkedIn to Salesforce, and then you did some investments. Was it the investing side that was like, oh, I should go try to just go build my own thing? Like, what was that startup bug for you?
Yeah, it's actually funny. Like, I'm really a startup guy. The exceptions are actually the big companies. So, I started my career, I was an electrical engineer. I started at Apple. Everything in between until I got to LinkedIn, I don't know, 15, 20 years later has been startups.
Well, and you got bought by LinkedIn, right? So
Right.
you
We
got
got the
like
last company
consumed
got
by
bought by,
LinkedIn.
yeah, the last company got bought by LinkedIn. And frankly, like we got there and we were like, oh my God, this is, big companies obviously move slower. I'm going to lose my mind here. And it was actually one of those things where I originally was just going to stay for 12, 18 months. But I got to kind of rebuild the Sales Navigator team. We got to go rebuild the product roadmap. And I was having a lot of fun, right? I was really, enjoying what we were doing and the culture there. And LinkedIn is a very strong product culture based on what Reed and others built at the beginning. And so I ended up staying longer than I thought I would. And towards the end of that tenure, I was kind of getting bored, and I didn't have bored is the wrong word. I would say my growth, my learning curve had started to flatten, right? I felt like I wasn't learning new stuff, which is always kind of my indicator of wanting to do something new. And Brett Taylor and Mark called and said, hey, we think you'd be right to run Sales Cloud. And I thought, well, that will increase the learning curve, right? And so that's why I went to Salesforce. And I think that Salesforce is an amazing sales and marketing and business development, corporate development company. But ultimately, I wanted to get back to my roots as a startup guy. And so when I had the right idea, I left and started doing that.
In old tech. And it sounds like you're taking a page out of Benioff's book on going after the SMB mid-market as they did against Siebel. And he went out and got funding from Ellison.
Old tech, but they're still able. We just got for one of our clients today a 9% price increase next year, which blows my mind that they could get away with that, but they know how hard that switch is.
Yeah, I mean, never rule out Mark Benioff, right? Like Salesforce is not going away. Listen, the thing that's amazing about CRM that no one realizes is that it is a very fragmented market. And as you pointed out, Adam, like once you're really locked in, it's hard to move. I mean, if you remember back in the 80s, there was a company called Act that was doing desktop PC software.
Sure.
They're still around. They're still doing significant.
You just don't ever hear about them.
Yeah, you just don't hear about them. I mean, Siebel, which is now owned by Oracle, still a ton of customers for Siebel, right, out there. So this stuff never goes away. It just every decade there seems to be a new player that emerges that gets some footing. So last decade it was HubSpot and really started to eat into Salesforce on the low end. And I think that when you have these disruptive technology curves like AI is providing now, you've got an opportunity for another disruption.
Yeah, 100%. So I want to go back, whether it be early days at LinkedIn, Salesforce, Coffee, or any startup you've been a part of. As you're building go-to-market strategy and motions, one of the things that we hear when we talk to founders is like, there's this moment where it's like, shit, this is out of control, and I got to do something or we're not going to survive. And we've heard everything from, I got to fire the entire sales team because they all suck. Our tech stack that we just spent $200,000 on is awful, and I got to rip it all out, and that's sunk cost. The success momentum is garbage. We onboarded all of these customers, but none of them are getting time to value. The 11x story, so to speak, where everyone cancels after a trial. Like, talk me through like a moment where you were like, you just looked in the mirror and you were like, I got to fix something or we're toast.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you. There's lots of examples for that, but I'll give you kind of at least a large company example, a small company example. So at LinkedIn, when I came there, it was about Sales Navigator. The group I ran was about 250 million in revenue. They're doing over $1 billion now, and the assumption was like, hey, listen, this is a $250 million revenue business. It's like it's cranking, it's great. But when I really dug into the product. We had no multi-year deals. We had no. What it really was a few small features that were getting people over the line. But as soon as people were hacking the hell out of free and premium and trying to get those to go work for them to avoid paying the premium Sales Navigator tax.
Sure.
And so one of that was really starting to understand what was the magic moment when someone would convert, right? So we had a team there called BizOps, which I got completely spoiled. Startups don't have things like this. But BizOps went in and said, okay, first of all, what is our biggest opportunity? Is it white space, or is it actually doubling down on the customers that we have? And it turned out that we just were not anywhere near as highly penetrated into the companies that we already had engagements with. So there was if we could come up with the right feature set to go expand that was a huge opportunity for us. And the other was, we would churn out a lot of people in that first 30 days who had not engaged enough with the product. And so the team did all this, machine learning analysis and figured out there's a engaged seller metric they came up with, and said if you perform actions A, B, and C within the first 2 weeks, right, you are 5 times more likely to go convert. Yeah. And that was the magic moment where great, let's focus all of our product effort, let's focus all of our customer success and engagement efforts around that. And that was a huge turning point for us in terms of just kind of unlocking value. So it wasn't that we had to kill something. We definitely had to rethink the product pretty radically to find value there. But it was something where we just didn't we were kind of on autopilot because LinkedIn is in this great position with the data set that they have to not have to be as sharp as you might have to be in a startup and be on top of that stuff.
And is that where the social selling index started coming out, where there's that whole social selling to try to figure out where people are actually utilizing the product?
Yeah, I'm kind of smiling because social selling index predated me. So
okay.
it was actually something that we looked at. That was another thing that we had data to go take a look at. And it turned out in a significant number of cases, a high social selling index was inversely correlated with your win rate, right? Because you were spending too much time, hey, how are you doing? Let me comment on your posts and things like that. So once we actually had closed won data coming in, once we had, my team had built the CRM sync and we could pull in closed won data, we kind of realized that. And so if you noticed in the years, social selling went from on the home page to kind of buried somewhere deep in menus. That's why.
Yeah. So as you guys are building out coffee, and going against some of the bigger competitors, how do you drive market awareness for the organization? Because a lot of startup companies, and we're working with a couple right now, it's difficult for them because the concept of marketing and awareness isn't what they believe. Let's get a bunch of BDRs, let's do a bunch of calling, but then they're not getting the response rates, they're not getting the conversion rates. So how do you drive that awareness, especially when you're going up against these big competitors? And you have a bunch of other ones like Pipedrive and Adio. There's a lot of little people as well. So you kind of get stuck in that. that
Yeah, I
mix?
mean, the approach we're taking, there's a great book by this guy, Dave Gerhardt, called Founder
Mhm.
Brand,
Yep.
that I highly recommend. He was the kind of guy behind a lot of the success of Drift in the early days from a
Yep.
marketing standpoint. And so a lot of what I'm doing is I have gotten very engaged on LinkedIn in the last few months and starting to build that audience. We just launched our own podcast, Revenue Renegades. We've got a strong list of folks there. So a lot of what we're trying to do is way in, well in advance of when the product rolls out, which will be over the next quarter or two. Starting to build that momentum and that awareness, and I think that's the investment that we're going to do is more on these kind of brand building marketing pieces. But I also think it's getting in front of a lot of those individual folks. So how do you get connected to all of the funds that are doing, investing in early stage companies and incubating those companies? How do you become that, natural part of the stack where they're like, oh, I got to go start a company. Let me get Google, Slack, Zoom, and coffee, right? How does that become part of that process?
It sounds fairly like a good stack. Coffee on top of
Yeah,
all your
sounds like
tech
a good
stack.
snack to me. Yeah,
I mean, everyone needs coffee, right?
exactly. Everyone
I'm
needs coffee.
sure that played in the name.
Oh, we're having a lot of fun with the names. Actually,
I
I think
can't
that like
imagine.
the edition sizes for pricing are probably going to be like tall, grande, vente.
Yeah,
So we're gonna have a good time.
I like it. I think a lot of people don't realize how much or how simple naming could be.
Hmm.
So I started my career in pharma and medical device, and like the hundreds of millions of dollars that's spent naming drugs. Like a lot
Sure.
of people, like Ambien, a lot of people don't realize is AMBN, good morning.
Oh my God. Yeah,
Right,
no
like
idea.
you would never know unless you spent time there. But like something as simple as like coffee, like how you can play off of that with, most people drink coffee. Like we could go on and on and
Yeah,
on.
it was not it was we paid $100,000 for the domain for
Oh,
coffee.ai,
I
but I mean
bet you did.
worth every penny. Yeah.
I love it. I do. I love it. When you talk about those aha moments, I want to tie this back to the go to market gap, which is the stabilization to foundation to repeatability to scalability. And most, if not all, founders we talk to have this build it and they will come mindset. And we're
Mhm.
going to start a company and we're immediately going to have repeatability, right? The
Yeah.
customers are going to come rolling in the door and I'm going to hire 4 sales reps and they're going to all do everything the same way. And
Yeah.
it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Um, I've yet to see that happen, barring a few companies. I think, publicly, Clay certainly seems to be the closest, but I'm sure they had more than their fair of struggles as well.
Clay, by the way, has been around for a long time. They wandered in the
Most people don't
wilderness
realize this, right?
for many years, and then suddenly it feels like
They
that.
popped.
It's another one of those 10-year overnight successes, right? Yeah.
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 But when you look back, like, where do you think in your experience, and you've led a lot of teams and a lot of companies, where's the biggest gap? Is it stabilization to foundation, foundation to repeatability, or repeatability to scalability? And why?
That's a great question. I do think that there is, to your point, I think the whole lean startup movement actually in some ways was, and I used to work for Steve Blank, it was kind of the spiritual godfather of that movement that Eric Ries took on. But I do think that there's uh, a general premise that if it's not working very quickly, you give it up and you pivot
Mm,
to something else. And I do think that, listen, products are much easier to build right now, right, than they've
yeah.
ever been. It is still really hard to go find that true product market fit. Not just like people are using my stuff, but people are actually opening up their wallets and paying for it and enjoying it and renewing, right?
Yeah,
So
100%.
I love. So I was talking to Adam Robinson the other day from our B2B,
Our
and
B2B.
I love the fact that he's like, was at like 4 million of ARR for our B2B and said, we don't have product market fit, right? And almost every founder that you're referring to would say, we've got over 1 million in ARR, we've got product market fit, right? So I do think there's that level of, to me, the Jeffrey Moore style crossing the chasm gap is about
Yep.
how do you go from I've built a product, I've got some people who are engaged in using it, to I've really found a audience and I'm delivering a complete solution for that audience. And that audience is now I can rinse and repeat that motion. And I think that is where a lot of startups fall off before they ever, see the scaling part of it.
It's so funny. I was just talking to actually a rep today, and we were talking about challenges with closing, getting deals across the pipeline. We talked a lot about their ICP, their buying persona, the value proposition, but I brought up crossing the chasm. So it's funny that you brought that up because I think that is a really big challenge that people like books from I think 2001 or it's like an old book, but you look at it and reread it, and it's really some of the same challenges that we've been struggling with. They just kind of have gone away.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're going to design the ultimate go-to-market system, you would basically say, here are the customers that are ready to buy your product right now, right?
Yep.
And then the
Yep.
next layer of the onion would be, here are the set of folks who are looking to buy something in your category right now. The next layer would be, here are the set of folks who should be looking at stuff in your area, and how do you go do that? And you mentioned
Sure.
ICP. I think, it's remarkable to me that companies who don't even have an agreement on what their ICP is between their sales and marketing department. So
Nope.
you've got no kind of alignment across all these go-to-market functions.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just building a board deck with another client, and I had the CMO and the VP of sales. Like we were kind of just going through the deck and getting everything together. And the marketing guy did something really interesting. He goes, "Let's stop calling sales and marketing. Let's just go commercial, and let's
Mm.
blend everything into the commercial strategy and enable that with the investors to have that commercial strategy conversation versus like sales versus marketing, or here's top of funnel versus mid funnel, bottom of the funnel. So here's our commercial strategy, and we built the deck around the commercial strategy,
Yeah.
which I think will start tearing some of these down. I totally agree with the ideal customer profile. So based on that, and you've been in this space for a while, how often should people be pressure testing their ICP, buying persona, value propositions in today's market?
People buy from people. That's why companies who invest in meaningful connections win. The best part? Gifting doesn't have to be expensive to drive results, just thoughtful. Sendoso's intelligent gifting platform is designed to boost personalized engagement throughout the entire sales process. Trust me, I led sales for a Sendoso competitor, and I could tell you, no one does gifting better than Sendoso. If you're looking for a proven way to win and retain more customers, visit sendoso.com.
I think it's almost a continuous thing, to be honest, right? I think here's the reality of all the go-to-market stack today. Back to that kind of, the onion analogy or the layers analogy. It's like we are all taking these approximate stabs with different disconnected systems as to who is our ideal customer, when are they ready to engage, what's the right message we should go deliver to them, are they properly onboarded? Are they engaged with the product? There's all, it's really kind of a mess. One of the things we say at Coffee is you can't have good AI with bad data. And so I think
Can we like put that on a billboard
yeah,
somewhere?
yeah, exactly. And I think that, listen, as you know, most of the data in today's CRMs is crap, right? In fact, the last company we had, FlipTop, we were doing kind of account and lead scoring, Einstein before Einstein. And the thing that was really fascinating is when we looked at all these across, hundreds of clients, the only data you could trust in the CRM is when the rep was going to get paid. And so the thing that we said was, if a rep, what fields does a rep need to go get their commission check? Okay, the deal, we have to say the deal closed. Here's a proper dollar amount. Here's at least one contact that's associated with it. So you had some things that you could rely on, and the data quality fell off a cliff after that because you were relying on them to do it manually. So I think that this whole notion of how are folks engaging with my company and all, like, the more that we can automate the ingestion of that data and the synthesis of that data, and some of it's structured and some of it's unstructured. So how do you fuse those things? I think the better off you're going to be able to go get a real TLDR as to what's happening with an account and have a unified front across your go-to-market teams.
I can go super deep on data because I don't think, and we talk about this a lot, shit data in equals shit data out 27 ways from Sunday. And no one wants to spend the time, I don't even want to say the money, the effort to make sure that their data is clean. And Dale, I forget, we were just talking about this with someone the other day, or I was reading something about, it was Kyle Norden, who's the CRO of Owner.
Yeah.
You know, Kyle, we're all part of GTM Fund. Kyle's one of the best revenue leaders I know.
Yeah.
And he was posting something the other day about the incredible success that his BDR team has seen by not just changing like how they reach out to and what they're saying, but the quality of the data so that they're not spending time reaching out to numbers that are, oh, sorry, number disconnected. Sorry, email bounced. And I think that not enough people realize that you could have all the BDRs, the best AEs in the world, the best CEO, hell, you could have the best product. If your data sucks, you have no chance because you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute. When it comes to data, specifically people data, numbers data, like where are you getting good data? Is there a single source of a ZoomInfo or Apollo or whoever, or are you a big fan of Clay and massive waterfall enrichments with your preferred providers that we do not need to mention if we don't want to because they're not paying to be here? But I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, we've kind of taken a waterfall approach. So we don't
Yeah.
think there is a single approach for any person or company data. And frankly, we have enrichment is built into Coffee, and so you don't have to go out and immediately go buy a third-party data source.
That's very cool.
So, but one of the things about it is that by no means is that all of the niche pieces. I mean, we kind of feel like the broad brush stuff should be covered by our enrichment, so you can get industry revenue range, LinkedIn profiles, titles, things like that when we have matches for that. And the rest of it should just be AI searching for stuff in the background. So if I have a very specific thing like I sell a remote work solution, right? No data provider is going to have that out of the box, but I should just be able to have a smart field that says, go take a look at the career pages of all of the companies in Coffee, in my instance, and go take a look if they use the word remote in their job postings, right? So then you can kind of fill in those kind of missing pieces there. But yeah, we've not found a single magical source that does it all. We did a huge data exercise when we got started in the summer of last year, where we probably looked at like 50 different vendors, 40 or 50 different vendors, and got all their data tables and did a bunch of bake-offs. And we ultimately selected multiple of them to kind of waterfall for our in-house thing. And I think that will be an ongoing process. But I'll give you an example of how bad the data stuff is in CRM. So we have a free app. We're going to have a whole bunch of these little free apps as part of our demand gen program called CRM Grader that we rolled out. And the idea was go connect your CRM and we will give you a score as to what's the quality of the data in your CRM across your deals, across your contacts, and across your companies. And one of the customers that signed up early on, I was looking at this thing, and we have a tool inside of Coffee we call Revenue GPT, which is like a Chat GPT style interface where you just ask questions. So I was like, "Hey, what's the average?" We were working with this customer and said, like, "What's our average sales cycle?" And he gave me a negative number. And I was like, oh shit, something must be broken in our software. So we better take a look at this. And so my VP of engineering goes off and looks at it and goes, no, actually, it's the correct answer. What the reps are doing is they're not putting anything in the CRM until they have to get their commission check. And so actually they're putting the create date is after the actual close date when they're putting information in, and the average deals is like minus 17 days or something like that. So that's an example of CRM gone really wrong.
I love that. Now, I was just looking at your site before we jumped on, and I was going to ask, one of my questions I was going to ask is, what's better, the website grader from HubSpot or the CRM grader from Coffee?
But, I think they're very different. They're meant at totally different products. I mean, like HubSpot has been our inspiration for that. So we were like, website grader is. Yeah, and
I love it, and I love it because you need a funnel, right? You need people. Right. I'll be super interested how many people actually will connect their CRM into something that they're not completely like. I think it'd be okay if we had if we were collaborating with Coffee, we knew the customer would be like, yes, go integrate, go connect Coffee, and grade your CRM, because it actually would help us, because we go in every place and we're like, okay, first thing, let's rebuild HubSpot. We just did $100 million. We just did a company $100 million, and they were on sugar, and we just did a whole conversion in HubSpot.
Oh my God.
So it was kind of a pain, but
Yeah, that was not fun, by the way.
I'll be super, and we did it in 45 days. Like it was
That's
a
amazing.
lift.
Yeah.
It was a lift.
So a few things to your point. First of all, like you're right. The friction of CRM Grader is much higher than Website Grader, where you just say, "Hey, listen, put in your email and name, and we'll send you a report on your website." We will have free products coming out over the next quarter that are kind of more like Website Grader, where you're just literally putting in some information and getting a report sent to you, and don't need to connect your CRM. I've always been kind of surprised about how many people are willing to go connect their CRM, especially small and medium businesses. Obviously, when you get to enterprise, they're like, here's my committee, here's my security review, all of that piece. But I've always been amazed that like somebody with admin access is like, oh yeah, I'll just do that the way they connect their Google account.
Give you all my data.
I'll give you all my data. Yeah. And so it's also, I've always been surprised in both at FlipTop and through even with Sales Navigator, when we did the Salesforce integration, the number of Sales Navigator customers that would just go connect to Salesforce without having to go through some kind of big security review first was surprising to me.
Yeah, it's I mean, we work with companies where you'd be amazed. I mean, Dale, you know what I'm talking about. Like we've gone to companies that have, call it a sales team of 20, and 18 of the 20 have super admin access. Like it blows my mind. Like to be clear, we're a company of 3 and we don't even all have super admin access. Like that's how locked down. Like one person, maybe 2 should have super admin access, not 20 of your reps who create 600 workflows.
Yeah.
What's my login?
Forgot password at revenue-reimagined.com.
1, 2, 3 password. Yeah. No, but it's also, it speaks to one of the biggest strengths, as you know, of companies like Salesforce, is that kind of API system, that kind of app exchange ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so the ability of people to kind of get that information out of that system, makes it easy, but it also makes it easy for folks like us, folks like you, to migrate folks into different platforms. Yeah.
So, Doug, when we talk about AI, and we talk to a lot of people about AI, and we were talking to someone, Dale, I think yesterday when we were on a podcast, excuse me, and it was about what's the future of AI, right, for sales.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like, it's not just data enrichment. You have to look at more than that. Like it has to be, how do you allow people to focus on revenue producing activities and all that fun stuff. But I think that's table stakes. When I think, and I admittedly, I've not looked at your website in depth because I wanted to have the conversation. But when I think of like the AI powered CRM, what I'm thinking is I don't have to drag my deal from one stage to another based on what's going on. It's going to put the deal in the proper stage. And I don't need to fill out that I have a decision maker, because based on the conversations and the emails and all the data you're ingesting, Coffee knows that there's a decision maker associated with the deal. I'm probably thinking about this at a too high of a level, but is that where the vision is that the CRM works for me as the rep instead of me having to work the CRM?
So the last part of it is actually our tagline, if you went on our website, which is the AI for CRM. It works for you.
And I did not go on the website, so I could be your marketing partner. No, I'm not.
You could be our marketing. No, we're still kind of in early stage and stealth. So there's not a lot of product information yet on the website, as I'm sure Dale saw. But the general idea is, it should be doing most of the work for you. Now, our particular view on the example that you gave of the opportunity pipeline is we may not be ready to automatically, create and move opportunities for you. And just because I think you're going to say, oh, that was, you misinterpreted that, or you moved that too soon. But I think what we can do is to say, hey, based on what I heard, from your last email exchange or the transcript of the last call, et cetera, this seems like we should go create an opportunity, and there's one button confirm for that to go move something or make it happen. But the other thing is there is no one size fits all for AI. So, I mean, everybody thinks now AI equals ChatGPT equals LLMs, but, there's machine learning, there's all kinds of different variants of it. So, when we say AI first, we truly mean from the beginning. Like for us, we never throw away data in coffee. So we have a data lake house in the back end. So simple things like, hey, what does my pipeline look like compared to a week ago, right? We can go do for you. Or what are the last 5 states of this field, right? Let me go see what that was. Let me roll back to this previous version, right? So I think that's a big part of how do you have AI? Because again, over time, AI is great for things like, let me give you a meeting brief for this meeting. Let me go summarize that call that just happened. Let me suggest some action items. Let me draft a follow-up email for you. Let me give you a TLDR so anybody can go take a look at an account or a person and see kind of what's this current status of our company's interaction with that person or that company. So it's all great for that stuff. But ultimately, it should be about, hey, I noticed that, we're this far into the quarter and, you're a little behind on your pipeline coverage, or, things are like, how do you start to get more proactive? And the only way to do that is to make sure you've got history that you're capturing.
I love it. I would try it. When I think of all the companies that we work with that have shit data hygiene and poor CRMs and CRMs that have to be ripped out and like reps who don't want to work them and managers who are never going to do anything about it because the rep's the top rep. And at the end of the day, if the deal closes, while I can't forecast,
Right.
the deal closes.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see it, to try it, and to learn more.
Thank you.
Let me, last question before we go into some quick rapid fire. So go-to-market's changing, right? It changes arguably every day. We talked about how often you need to update, things such as ICP or buyer persona. But with that, you're Nostradamus for a minute. Where's go-to-market going? What's the future of go-to-market in the next 3 to 6 months? Broadly speaking, much broader than CRM.
I like to think about it from the buyer's perspective, going backwards, right? Because I think that so much of what we've done is seller push forward. So I think about myself as a B2B buyer or just a consumer in general. I want to be able to have as much information that I can go get myself, right? And not have to talk to a person, right? So, things like, I saw you had Jaco's book on your back shelf there, Adam. So, behind the chair, revenue architecture. So I've known Jaco for a long time, and Amanda Kalo from OneMind actually collaborated with him recently on effectively having a virtual Jaco, if you can imagine something, how either exciting or scary that might be. There's a lot of Red Bull involved in that.
Depends if he has shoes on.
Yeah, no shoes. He's in his van. He's drinking a lot of Red Bull. But imagine effectively having an AE or an SE rather on your website that you can just query and talk to forever and get any information you want about the product. It's not like some secret hidden pricing page, or you have to go do a trial before and talk to certain reps. Yeah. So I think the giving buyers a lot more of the power is a big trend towards that. I think the other piece is we've all gotten really good. Our internal pattern recognition system have gotten good at filtering out spam calls, spam messages, all that stuff. The idea of the AI SDR, which is like sales loft and outreach on autopilot, I think is a fail, right? I don't think it's the right approach. I think like what Mark Cosaglo is doing in Operator, and I think other people who are saying we have such precise data that you can effectively craft something where it's like, this is an email that would not make sense to anybody but me, right? It's that targeted to my business, and it's about helping in the same way that I think that HubSpot kind of pioneered this inbound marketing. Let's kind of create content that helps. I think at a macro level, they've done that. I think it's now down to a one-to-one marketing level of one. So it's really about like, how do you help the buyer in their journey, and how do you not try to force feed a lot of stuff through a funnel?
I love it.
That's great. I think it's spot on. Let's end with some rapid fire. I wanted to take that out of Since Adam was talking so much, I had to jump in a little bit.
It's so rare that I get to talk when I'm on a call with you. Let's be real. Like, let's be honest with one another here now.
Right.
What's the hardest leadership lesson that you've learned, and how did you resolve it?
I think hire slow, fire fast is probably one of the key things. Everything starts with people, right? And so we've done this thing for my last couple companies where when you join, I give the culture presentation and I say, my job is not to create a family, right? My job is to put together the most winning sports team I can. And to that end, we're going to put a meeting on the calendar 90 days out. I always feel weird saying this, but in 90 days, we're both going to know whether this is working or not. And I think by having that forcing function, it's going to be unless it's a hell yes, it's a goodbye, right?
Yeah.
I could not agree more. Could not agree more. What, if you lose everything tomorrow, what's the very first move you're going to make?
Define lose everything.
Coffee is gone. Everything that you've put into coffee is gone. You can't go back to LinkedIn. You can't go back to Salesforce. The bank accounts or the exits are dry. You have a little bit of money, but you arguably have to start over. What are you going to do? Where are you going to start?
That never has scared me. I mean, I think that I actually think that they will find in the next 50 years that there's a gene for optimism and a gene for perseverance. And I think they're the two most aligned indicators for success in entrepreneurship. So I feel very fortunate. I've got a great partner, my girlfriend. I've got, my kids are all doing well. My dad died when I was pretty young. And the two things that kind of has shaped a lot of my worldview is, I remember visiting him and he was kind of going there's so much more I want to do. And I thought about that, and he's in his 60s. And I realized I could be 150 and I'd still be on my deathbed going, there's so much more I want to do. So I've always had that kind of, there's more stuff in the world than I'll ever be able to experience. But the other thing is if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, what regrets would I have, or what issues would I have? And, there's a short period after my divorce where it was really, really tough with the kids. But other than that, I'm in a place where anything you could throw at me, I've got my core community. I've got my belief in myself, and I'd go figure something else out.
I love that.
That's awesome, man.
An optimism gene.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. We're going to find it for sure.
I like that.
I love it.
What's one piece of advice you were once given that is, you completely disagree with now? So something you were given in the past and now you're like, that was horseshit.
I think I'll just go back and reiterate on the kind of lean startup movement. I think that people give up too soon, right? I think that, one of the reasons, frankly, for Microsoft's success is they're not particularly brilliant at products, but by the third time, they usually put out a decent version, right? So with Windows, it was Windows 95, right? After a bunch of fiascos before that. And I think that belief that if your core assumptions are correct, right, then you should keep going. And I think that too many startups are yeah, we did that for 6 months and we didn't have $1 million in ARR, so we're going to pivot to something else. Or this got really hard and I just don't have the perseverance to push through it, is the cause of a lot of unnecessary failure. So I think the whole lean startup, you've got to go measure everything. And if it's not being measured and you're not hitting your metrics, go move to something else is wrong.
I like
I
it.
agree.
All right, Doug. So most of our audience is revenue leaders, founders, CEOs. Many of them listen to the show because they are proverbially drowning in whatever their particular go-to-market gap is. What's your single most powerful piece of go-to-market advice from experience you would give to someone who's drowning right now?
Drink coffee.
Drink coffee.
I like that.
I think that it all starts with your buyer's journey. again. So I think that so many people are focused on their internal processes, internal systems. How are we pushing stuff out to customers? I think so. I'm a product person first and foremost. I'm a builder. I always, for myself and from product managers, always said, go use the product yourself. Go be a secret
Love it.
shopper, kind of your product.
A must.
I think for most companies, I think if they actually were a secret shopper to their own selling process, they would discover a lot of waste, a lot of friction, a lot of noise, a lot of things that are putting customers off. So I think for me, the first thing is how do you make that as simple as possible? I think there was it might have been a Hemingway thing where he was writing a letter to someone who said, "I'm sorry it's so long, but I didn't have time to write you a shorter one." And it's kind of that same analogy. I think many companies build up these very complicated processes and need to spend time going back and simplifying it, starting with the buyer and working backwards.
That might be, and this is a great place to close, that might be the single best piece of advice we have ever got on this show. Because if you don't, and I don't, Dale will tell you, I'm not great at giving out praise. If you're not putting yourself, and everyone talks about secret shopping and this bullshit, but like every CRO, how often do we talk about your sales process doesn't align with your buyer's process? Your 17 different sales stages in your CRM are not how your buyer buys. If you're not going through that process and saying, would I buy from me? And if the answer is not hell yes, you need to change your damn process. Yeah. That is the takeaway from this show. Doug Camplejohn, thank you so much for checking us out. Go check out coffee.ai. I am excited to try it when it's available for release. And we're glad that you spent some time with us, man.
Thanks, guys. It was really fun.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
All right.